There are certain ideas, let's even call them secrets, that sales pros absolutely don't want you to know about, because once more people start to understand how these secrets work and what's really behind them, then suddenly they have more competition. I want to walk you through some of the absolute most elite sales secrets that will help you stand out from your competition and ultimately close more sales. In this video, I'm going to show you the 7 sales secrets the pros don't want you to know. Check it out. Number 1, drop the excitement. Now, I know this is counter to what so many of us have been taught, but excitement in the sales conversation is crushing those conversations. It's actually hurting the conversations. Prospects are so used to salespeople that have tons of enthusiasm and tons of excitement. So immediately what that excitement is doing is it's putting us in the bucket with all of the other sales reps out there. And what we want to do, obviously, is stand out completely from all of them. And so we want to think so much less like that excited, pitchy sales guy, but instead thinking more like a doctor. How would a doctor engage in a really valuable conversation, understanding exactly what's going on? The value in the conversation is not me and what I have to say, but instead me asking really good questions to draw out of the prospect what they most care about. So dropping the excitement, while it seems counter to what so many of us has been taught, it's actually going to help you close more deals and really set you up as looking like the expert, looking like just a genuine human being engaging in a conversation. Number 2, probing is for amateurs. Now, I see so many videos and trainings about probing questions, great probing questions to ask. And I always think about the idea of probing as exactly what we don't want to be doing. And this is what so many salespeople right now are actually doing. Probing is really the process of asking a bunch of different questions of a prospect without a consistent flow. So if you think of probing like aliens might probe a human, right, in a movie, it's like they're just kind of like poking around all over with no specific process of exactly what they know they're looking to discover. On the other hand, a sales pro is going to be asking a series of questions that are really building value in the process, and they're all working through one flow. So it's not like they're over here and then they're over there and then they're over here again and then, oh wait, they're back here and then they're over there, right? They're instead asking a consistent set of questions that are going to ultimately build value. And they know what those questions are ahead of time. So they're not just making it up and they're not just winging it, but instead they're taking the prospect through a consistent process that, by the way, they're doing every single time they're in front of a prospect, ultimately leading to a much higher close rate with their prospects. Number 3, challenge your prospects. I always think back to that old school adage that the customer is always right or the client is always right. We so often extrapolate that to a sales conversation as well. The reality is that your prospects are not always right. In fact, they're usually quite often wrong. When you ask a prospect about their key challenges, so often they're going to come to you with a challenge that's not really the key challenge. It's like it's a tertiary challenge, it's an outside challenge, it's an auxiliary challenge, but it's not really the core of what's wrong. And so it's your job as a high-level professional salesperson to challenge your prospects, to call them out, not in an aggressive or na-na-na-boo-boo kind of way, right? But instead to challenge them with exactly understanding what's really going on, to help them discover what the key challenge is or what the key objective is or what's most important to them. If you do that now, you are the ultimate sales expert. One of the phrases that I will always use in challenging prospects is something like this. You know what, George? Why don't we take a step back here and help me understand what is really the most important component of what we're talking about right now? You're pulling them back, and by challenging them just a little bit, now you're bringing them into the conversation that really matters, that they really want to have. Number 4, live in data. This is really something that is transformed selling in just the past few years. The amount of data that we can get on our prospects before we ever even talk to them, before we ever even interact with them. Now, of course, one of the best sources of prospect data is ultimately going to be coming from LinkedIn Navigator. At our organizations, we love living in LinkedIn Navigator because there's so much valuable insight that you can get from your prospects. Now, if you're at an organization where you have some really fancy systems like Discover.org or other systems that really help you get a lot of data on your prospects, great. But at the very least, every single person has access to at least getting insight from LinkedIn to find out some of the key ideas about what is really driving this person. What do they care about? What does their organization actually look like? Who are some of the key people that are in similar positions to them? Understanding before you meet with an important prospect, understanding all the data or all of the information that you can get on this person to really understand the full picture. And again, using LinkedIn Navigator, which requires that you pay, and they don't pay me to tell you that, but getting that insight from LinkedIn Navigator is going to give you a lot more insight in the prospect than just, of course, going straight to LinkedIn, for example. Number 5, getting a no is not bad. This is one of the secrets that so few salespeople really live by, and only the pros really own this idea, is that a no is not bad. So many salespeople are spending their entire careers trying to avoid the no, and what they ultimately get are a lot more, hey, this is great, let me think about it, or let me get back to you. If you're the kind of salesperson right now where you have a lot of kind of wishy-washy, unclear outcomes in your sales pipeline where you're still putting it or you're leaving it in your sales pipeline and you're kind of in like follow-up mode and checking in mode, you really have to start to embrace this idea that no is not a bad thing. Top performers are so much better at either getting a no or a yes and avoiding all of that in-between stuff. And what also being comfortable with that no allows you to do is it allows you to take all that pressure off of the prospect to really allow them to be comfortable to either come to a no or a yes decision. And so we often want to be saying things to prospects like, you know what, George, just so I can get a real understanding of whether this is going to be a fit both ways, let me ask you a couple of questions. And so now what you're conveying to the prospect is, I don't know if this is going to be a fit both ways. And now you're taking a lot of that pressure off and you're not putting pressure on them to say yes. Instead, you're just trying to determine whether there's really a fit. Number 6, be a peer, not a servant. This is so important. Your prospects don't want to be served. They don't want a servant, someone who's saying, yes, sir, or, whatever the prospect says is great, right? Instead, be a peer to the prospect that you're in front of. Even if they're a CEO and your title is sales rep, you need to behave as if you're a peer. And that doesn't mean being disrespectful or flippant, of course, and that doesn't mean that you're cursing or you're just cracking random jokes, but I mean be a peer. Look them in the eye from person to person. Don't be afraid. Don't be subservient to them. Instead, treat them as if you would treat any other person. By being a peer and asking them tough questions and being willing to challenge them, you are going to be so much stronger in that sales process, and ultimately you're going to close so many more sales. It's amazing how often I see salespeople, when they get in front of someone with a high-level title, they suddenly become really subservient. It's immediately lowering their value in the eyes of that prospect. So instead, think like a peer, not a servant. Be willing to do whatever it takes to look at them eyeball to eyeball, not kind of having to look down in a nervous or uncomfortable kind of a way. Number 7, if they won't schedule a next step, you have nothing. You have nothing. If a prospect is unwilling to actually schedule a clear next step, you have nothing. It's so wild to me how this still is such a pervasive issue in sales, is that top performers are absolute maniacs about always scheduling clear next steps. Always have a clear next step coming out of any conversation with a prospect, whether it's face-to-face or by the phone, always have that clear next step. And if they're unwilling to schedule that and they're just saying, hey, why don't you try me back in 2 weeks? Or why don't you try me back in a couple of months? You have nothing. It's not worth putting in your pipeline. It's not anything to really think twice about. You need to be able to schedule that next step. And the more you get strong on scheduling next steps, the more you're going to hold those sales together. And again, if they're not willing to schedule a next step, you haven't lost anything anyways. Not a big deal. One of the questions that I challenge you to start asking every single prospect, every time you're on the phone with them or you're face-to-face is, do you have your calendar in front of you? If you start asking that, it's amazing how everyone has their calendar in front of them and they say, yeah. And you say, okay, great. What would make sense in terms of a next conversation? And guide them toward that meeting. Always schedule that meeting. And if they're unwilling to, you've got nothing, you have nothing to lose. Be willing to push and get that scheduled meeting. So there are the 7 secrets the pros don't want you to know. And if you enjoyed this video, then I have an awesome free training on the data-driven approach to help you crush your sales goals. Just click right here to get registered instantly. Seriously, just click right here. This is an in-depth training that will help you close more sales at higher prices, all while generating more meetings. Also, if you've got some value, please like this video below on YouTube and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking my face right about here to get access to a new video just like this one each week.